Welcome back to our channel, Shattered Trust Stories, where we explore the untold stories of relationships, heartbreaks, and the unexpected twists of life. Let's get started. The night air felt unusually cold as I stepped into the foyer of my home, the lights dimmed, casting long shadows across the polished wooden floors. I had just returned from an exhausting day of meetings, managing the company I had built from the ground up. Everything in my life had always felt stable, secure, and predictable, except for the nagging feeling that had started to build over the past few months. Something was wrong. The signs were small at first, a missed dinner here, a few late nights there, but as time went on, the cracks in my seemingly perfect life began to widen. When I opened the door to our bedroom that evening, I was hit with an unsettling sight. Lana, my wife of 15 years, was on her phone, her eyes glued to the screen. She didn't even notice me at first. There was a distance in her demeanor that hadn't been there before, a coldness that I couldn't ignore. My heart sank as I watched her scroll through her messages, occasionally glancing up to see if I was watching. When I finally cleared my throat, she quickly stuffed the phone under the pillow, a nervous laugh escaping her lips. "Hey, sorry," she said, forcing a smile. "I didn't hear you come in." I stood there, the weight of her words sinking in. The atmosphere was tense, the air thick with unspoken words. I had learned over the years to trust my instincts, and everything about the way she was acting screamed that something was off. But I didn't want to jump to conclusions. We'd had our share of arguments in the past, sure, but I had never suspected infidelity. After a few minutes of small talk, I decided to push the issue. "Is everything okay, Lana? You've seemed distant lately." She stiffened at my question, her fingers nervously tapping against the edge of the pillow. For a moment, I thought she might deny it, brush it off like she had done in the past. But instead, she let out a sigh, the weight of her own guilt seemingly too much for her to bear. "I've been busy, that's all," she replied, but her voice lacked conviction. Something wasn't right, and I knew it. I had worked too hard for too long to build this life, and I wasn't about to let her slip away without getting answers. The thought gnawed at me, turning my stomach. What was she hiding? The answer came sooner than I expected. Later that evening, I couldn't sleep. My mind raced with thoughts of Lana and what had been happening in our home when I wasn't around. I decided to confront her once again, but this time, I wasn't going to let her avoid the truth. I waited until she was in the bathroom, then picked up her phone from the nightstand. I didn't feel guilty. I needed answers. The first thing that caught my eye was a series of text messages between Lana and someone named Jason. Jason was someone I had known for years, a family friend, a man I had trusted implicitly. As I scrolled through the messages, the sickening truth began to unfold. Lana had been having an affair with Jason. The messages were explicit, filled with references to secret meetings, stolen moments, and whispered promises. My stomach turned as I read each line, my heart breaking with every word, but it didn't stop there. As I dug deeper into the messages, I found something even more devastating. Jason wasn't just a lover. He was involved in a much bigger scheme. There were references to financial dealings, offshore accounts, and discussions about the company. I couldn't believe what I was seeing. It was as though my entire life had been built on a lie. The company that I had poured my heart and soul into, the company that Lana and I had started together, was now being used as a pawn in a game of deceit and betrayal. When Lana returned from the bathroom, I didn't say a word. I just held up the phone, showing her the messages. She froze, her face turning pale as she saw what I had uncovered. She opened her mouth to speak, but no words came out. Her silence spoke volumes. In that moment, everything I had known about our marriage, our life together, shattered into a million pieces. "I'm sorry," she whispered, her voice trembling. "I didn't mean for it to happen like this." But her words were empty. The damage was already done. The trust one had in her was gone, and what followed was a blur of rage, confusion, and betrayal. The woman I had loved and built a life with was not the person I thought she was. She had been lying to me for months, and the truth was more painful than I could have ever imagined. What hurt the most was that she didn't just cheat on me. She had stolen something far more precious: my company, my legacy. In her quest for power, she had been scheming behind my back, trying to take over the business and secure her future with Jason. The affair was just the tip of the iceberg that I felt numb as I walked away from her that night, unsure of what to do next. But one thing was certain: I couldn't let her get away with this. She had taken so much from me, and now it was time for her to pay. The next few days were a blur of meetings with my lawyer, discussions about divorce proceedings, and planning the next steps. I couldn't believe how easily she thought she could take everything from me. She thought she could walk away with the company, with everything I had worked for. But she had underestimated me. I wasn't going to let her win. That I began to quietly gather evidence of Lana and Jason's illegal dealings, their financial fraud, and the underhanded tactics they had used to try and take control of the company. My lawyer worked tirelessly, digging into every contract, every transaction, and every suspicious financial record. As the days went by, the walls closed in on Lana and Jason. The deeper we dug, the more we found. What they didn't know was that I was the majority shareholder of the company. They thought they had won, but I still held the power. And now, with the evidence I had collected, I was going to make sure they paid for everything they had done. The days that followed were filled with a raw mix of anger and disbelief. Each time I thought about what Lana had done, a surge of fury would rise within me, burning through my chest like wildfire. I had always trusted her. We had built our lives together, our marriage, our family, our company. But now, I was facing a harsh reality: everything had been a lie. Lana's betrayal cut deeper than I ever imagined, and it wasn't just the affair that stung. It was the calculated betrayal, the years of secrets, and the ultimate treason against everything we had built together. That I couldn't look at her the same way anymore. Every time she spoke, it felt like nails on a chalkboard. She tried to apologize, tried to justify her actions, but none of it mattered. I wasn't interested in her excuses. I had seen what she was capable of, and the woman I thought I knew was nothing more than a stranger. She had taken my trust and trampled it, and now I was determined to take back what was mine. It was clear that this was no ordinary affair. This was about power, manipulation, and control. Lana hadn't just fallen in love with Jason, she had been using him as a pawn in a much bigger game. My company, the business that had been the heart of my life for the past 2 decades, was at the center of it all. Lana had made a move for it, and it wasn't just about taking money. She wanted everything I had worked for. I spent the next few days in a haze of strategizing, meeting with my lawyer, and poring over the evidence I had gathered. The financial fraud Lana and Jason had been involved in was more extensive than I had ever imagined. They had been siphoning money from the business, hiding assets in offshore accounts, and forging documents to cover their tracks. They thought they were invincible, that they could get away with it all. But they didn't know who they were dealing with. I had built this company from the ground up, and I wasn't going to let them destroy it. As the majority shareholder, I had power, more power than they could ever understand. Lana and Jason had no idea that I held the cards. They thought the company was already slipping from my hands, but I had been playing a different game all along. I had been silently gathering everything I needed to expose them for what they truly were. With the help of my lawyer, I began to take the necessary legal steps to secure my position in the company. I filed an injunction to prevent Lana from making any more moves to take control, and I started preparing for the worst. I knew that this was going to be a long, difficult battle, but I wasn't going to back down. I had been humiliated, and now it was time for my revenge. But it wasn't just about the business. It was about Lana's lies, her manipulation, and the way she had thrown everything we had worked for into the gutter. The more I thought about it, the more I realized that she wasn't just hurting me, she was hurting our son as well. He had always looked up to her. He had always trusted her. And now, his whole world was being torn apart because of her selfishness. That I couldn't let this go. I couldn't allow her to get away with everything she had done, not just to me, but to our family. I began to reach out to a few trusted people who might be able to help with the investigation. One of them was an old friend, a tech expert who specialized in cybersecurity. He had helped me with business-related issues in the past, and I knew he would be the perfect person to help me with the digital side of things. Together, we started to dig deeper into the digital footprint of Lana and Jason. We found hidden emails, private chats, and incriminating financial transactions that proved they had been planning this betrayal for months. The more we uncovered, the more disgusted I became. But I also felt a growing sense of power. I was taking control of the situation. They had thought they could break me, destroy everything I had built, but they were wrong. I was going to turn the tables on them, and they wouldn't even see it coming. As I gathered more evidence, I began to make preparations for the final step, the public exposure. Lana and Jason had gone too far. They had crossed a line that couldn't be uncrossed. I knew that when I revealed the truth, it would shatter their lives. It would expose their lies, their greed, and their manipulation to everyone around them. And I wasn't going to stop until I had destroyed their world, just as they had destroyed mine. It was time to make my move. As Lana sat across from me, her gaze shifted between the documents and my face, realizing that I had taken control of the situation. Her carefully constructed walls of denial started to crack. I could see the panic in her eyes, but she wasn't ready to accept her fate. Her fingers fumbled at the edge of the folder, her hand almost reaching for the incriminating documents, but I pulled them away before she could make contact. I watched her struggle. It was a rare moment for me, watching the woman who had been my partner for so many years, the mother of my child, break down like this. Yet, despite the anguish I felt, there was no sympathy left in me. She had chosen this path, betrayed me, and, in doing so, shattered everything that had once been sacred between us. There was nothing left to save. You thought I wouldn't find out, didn't you? I said, my voice steady but with an edge of anger that I had kept controlled for far too long. You thought you could just keep playing your games, juggling your life with Jason while pretending everything was fine at home. But you were wrong, Lana. I'm not the fool you took me for. I let my words settle in the room, the weight of them hanging between us like a storm cloud, and I watched her crumble. She tried to speak but choked on the words. Her lips quivered in shock, and for the first time in our entire relationship, I saw fear in her eyes. It wasn't the fear of losing me, it was the fear of losing everything. Please, James, she said, her voice barely audible. This isn't what you think. I was just confused, lost. I shook my head. Stop, Lana. I don't want to hear your excuses anymore. You had everything, and you threw it away for a man who didn't care about you. Who used you. He doesn't care about the family we built. And you were too blinded by your desires to see it. She stood up abruptly, as if trying to compose herself, but I could see her shaking. Her entire persona, the one she had so carefully curated over the years, was crumbling before my eyes. She stepped towards the table, and her fingers hovered over the folder again. Please, don't do this, she begged. You know how much I love you. This affair, it was a mistake. A stupid mistake. Let me make it right. I leaned back in my chair, crossing my arms over my chest, feeling an unshakable calm wash over me. This was it. The final moment where all the pain, all the anger I had stored up for months, could finally come to an end. This was my chance to reclaim what was rightfully mine. Love? I repeated her words with a bitter laugh. You can't even define love, Lana. What you did to me was betrayal. What you did to this family was theft. And now you'll face the consequences. I placed the folder back on the table, opening it slightly to reveal the damning evidence I had accumulated over the weeks. The offshore accounts, the fraudulent transactions, the hidden investments made in Jason's name, everything she thought was buried was now exposed, like a dirty secret out in the open. She tried to avert her eyes, but it was useless. The truth was staring her in the face. You think you can just take everything and walk away from this? I'm not going to let that happen, I continued, my voice growing firmer. You wanted to steal my company, my life, my family? Well, you're about to lose it all. Her face turned pale, and I could see the realization dawn on her. James, please, she whispered, her voice breaking. I never wanted to hurt you. Don't, I interrupted coldly. The damage is done, Lana. It's too late for apologies. What you did was deliberate. You didn't just cheat on me, you destroyed everything. You had your affair with Jason, and now you're going to see what happens when you try to take what doesn't belong to you. I pulled out my phone and showed her the texts I had gathered from Jason, messages that proved not just the affair but his deeper, more sinister involvement with the company's finances. He had manipulated her, used her to get closer to the company, all the while plotting behind her back. And now, I had all the evidence to expose him. That I could feel a rush of satisfaction as I saw her crumble, but I didn't stop. This wasn't about her feelings anymore. This was about justice. You'll lose the company, your reputation, your status, I said, savoring every word. Jason will be arrested for his part in this. And you, Lana, will have nothing left. You'll be left to pick up the pieces of your life, with nothing to show for it but regret. Her shoulders trembled as tears began to fall. She collapsed into a chair, her hands covering her face as if trying to block out the reality of the situation. But it was too late. She had crossed the line, and now it was time for her to face the consequences. You can cry all you want, I said coldly, but there's no going back. You made your choices, and now you're going to live with them. I stood up, leaving her there in the chair, broken and defeated. I wasn't done yet. I had one final move to make, something that would ensure she couldn't escape this mess. I had a meeting scheduled with my lawyer to finalize the paperwork that would strip her of any claim to the company. As I walked out the door, I left Lana behind, knowing that this was the moment when everything changed. The woman I had loved was gone, replaced by a stranger who had taken everything from me. But now, the tables had turned. This was no longer about her. It was about me, and what I was about to do to take back what was mine. The next few days were a blur of meetings, phone calls, and strategy. I'd always prided myself on being calm under pressure, but now, I was laser-focused. I had everything I needed to take down Lana and Jason. The plan I'd been working on for weeks was finally coming together. Lana, on the other hand, had no idea what was about to happen. Her desperation was palpable, but it wasn't enough to stop me now. She tried reaching out, calling multiple times, sending text messages filled with guilt and apologies. But I had already made up my mind. The woman I once loved, the mother of my children, was a stranger to me now. She wasn't the person I thought I knew. The betrayal ran deeper than I had ever imagined. It wasn't just the affair, it was her calculated efforts to destroy everything I had worked for. The company, the life I built, all of it was now at risk. And I wasn't going to let her get away with it. I met with my lawyer in the early hours of the morning, the cool air of the office matching the cold determination that had settled in my chest. The paperwork was ready, the strategy set. Every legal loophole had been sealed. Jason's involvement in the company's financial misdeeds would now be exposed, and I would be the one to bring it to light. His career, his life, would crumble, and I would be the one to watch it unfold. It was only fitting. He had stolen from me, and now, I would take everything back. But it wasn't just about Jason anymore. I wasn't done with Lana. There was one more thing I had to do to make sure she felt the full weight of her actions that I called her later that afternoon. The phone rang 3 times before she picked up. Her voice was shaky, her attempts to sound composed betraying the fear I knew she was feeling. "James," she said, almost pleading. "Please, we need to talk. We can fix this. You can't do this to me. I know I made mistakes, but..." "No," I cut her off. My voice was unwavering, like steel cutting through the air. "There's nothing left to fix, Lana. You crossed a line that can't be undone." There was a silence on the other end of the line. She was still trying to hold on, still clinging to the hope that I would somehow give her another chance. But the truth was, I wasn't the same man anymore. The man who loved her, who trusted her, was gone. And in his place was a man who would make her pay for what she had done. "You've already lost everything," I continued, my words sharp. "The company, the trust, the life you thought you could take from me, gone. But I'm going to make sure it's not just your reputation that's ruined. I'm going to expose everything, Lana. Every lie, every manipulation. You'll see how deep this goes." I could hear her breathing heavily on the other end, the realization that her world was about to collapse sinking in. But she didn't back down. "Please," she begged. "I'm sorry. I never wanted this. I was confused, I made a mistake." I didn't respond right away. Instead, I let the silence hang, allowing her words to echo in the empty room. But there was no mercy left in me. It was too late for apologies, too late for regret. The woman I had loved was gone, replaced by someone who had broken the very foundation of our lives. "I'm done with you, Lana," I finally said. "You're going to have to face the consequences of your actions. Jason too. I'm not going to stop until you both pay for what you've done." With that, I hung up the phone, ending the conversation before she could say anything more. She had no control anymore. It was my turn now. The next few days were filled with press conferences and media attention. As my lawyer and I made the necessary moves to ensure the company was protected, the fallout from Lana's actions began to surface. News outlets picked up the story of the financial fraud, and Jason's name was dragged through the mud. The legal team I had assembled worked around the clock to make sure that everything was done by the book, that I made sure to keep a low profile during this time. There was no need to gloat or make any public statements just yet. I had already won. The truth was out, and the people who had betrayed me were now dealing with the fallout, but there was still a part of me that couldn't let go. As much as I knew this was the right thing to do, as much as I had convinced myself that justice was being served, there was a part of me that was still grieving. Grieving the life I had lost, the family I had tried to protect, and the woman who had once been everything to me. Late one night, I found myself sitting in the office I had built with Lana by my side all those years ago. The room felt empty now, hollow. I ran my hand across the desk, remembering the late nights we'd spent working together, the dreams we had shared. But that was all gone now, shattered by lies and deceit. That I glanced at the papers on my desk, final drafts of the legal documents that would seal Lana's fate. The company was mine again, fully under my control. She would never have the power to take it from me again. But at what cost? As the days turned into weeks, I realized that the victory didn't feel as sweet as I had expected. It was hard to celebrate the destruction of a life that had once meant so much to me. But the truth was, I couldn't allow myself to stay trapped in the past. This was my future now, and as for Lana and Jason, they had no idea what they had coming. They had underestimated me, thought they could take everything from me. But they had only awakened a force they could never defeat. The following weeks felt like a strange limbo. The intensity of the initial shock had worn off, replaced by an eerie calm. The world seemed to have moved on, while I was still entrenched in the fallout. My life, once filled with purpose, now revolved around the dismantling of what Lana had taken from me in the slow, painful process of picking up the pieces, the media had taken interest in the scandal. Jason's involvement in the fraudulent activities had become the subject of public discourse, and his reputation, once revered as a trusted family friend and business associate, was now in tatters. My story had been shared in countless tabloids and financial news outlets, and I couldn't help but feel a strange sense of satisfaction when I read about his downfall. It was a sweet taste of justice, even if the victory was bittersweet, but that wasn't enough for me. No, the real satisfaction would come when Lana's life crumbled completely. She had thought she could walk away with everything, her affair, her greed, and her betrayal, all hidden behind a mask of innocence. But I had exposed the truth. She would never have the power she once had over me again. It was time to turn the final page. My first move was to ensure that the company was completely free from Lana's influence. The legal battle had been long and tedious, but after weeks of negotiation and wrangling, I had successfully regained control of the board. The shareholders had been informed, and the voting process was swift. With my majority shareholding in hand, I was untouchable. But I didn't stop there. Lana's financial misdeeds had been carefully documented, her attempt to embezzle company funds uncovered. It was time to ensure that she paid the price for her deceit. I had always been a meticulous planner, and every step I had taken up until this point had been calculated. But now, I felt a strange sense of closure. Lana had no idea how much worse it could get for her. She still believed she had some leverage, some way to escape the consequences. She had no idea how deeply I had infiltrated her life. The phone call came unexpectedly. It was Lana. Her voice was tinged with desperation, as though she had realized the full extent of her loss. "James, I don't know what's happening. I thought you would just move on. But now, everything is falling apart. I never wanted this. Please, can we talk? I want to fix things." I heard the familiar tremor in her voice, the same tone she had used when we were first together, when she was trying to win me over, trying to convince me to trust her. But this time, the manipulation wasn't going to work. I was done. "Lana," I said, my voice low and firm. "You had your chance. You threw it all away. You've done enough damage. You can't fix this. You can't fix us." There was a long silence on the other end. She was trying to find the right words, but she knew deep down that nothing she said could change the reality of the situation. "I'm sorry," she finally whispered, as if she thought it would somehow make everything better. But I didn't feel sorry. I didn't feel anything for her anymore. I hung up the phone without another word. The past was behind me, and there was no point in revisiting it. The chapter was closed, but the war wasn't over. Lana's legal team had been scrambling, trying to find a way to contest the divorce settlement, trying to claw back some of the assets she had lost. Her lawyer had even tried to argue that I had manipulated the situation to my advantage, that I had used my position to force her out of the company. But the evidence was indisputable. My legal team had built an airtight case, and there was no way she could win. I knew Lana was starting to panic. She had always been so confident, so sure of herself. But now, she was unraveling. She had lost everything. Her affair was exposed. Her financial crimes uncovered. Her reputation destroyed. And now, she was facing the harsh reality of having nothing left. Weeks later, I was sitting in my office, the quiet hum of the city outside the window, when the final blow came. It was an official notice from her lawyer, requesting a last-ditch settlement. They wanted a substantial payout, an attempt to regain some semblance of control over the situation. But I wasn't interested in negotiating anymore. I had already won. The company was mine, the evidence was in my favor, and there was no turning back. I sent a response through my lawyer, rejecting any further offers. It was over. There was nothing she could do to change it. But as I sat there, a strange feeling washed over me. It wasn't the satisfaction I had expected. No, it was emptiness. Lana's destruction hadn't brought me the closure I had hoped for. It hadn't healed the wounds that her betrayal had caused. Revenge, I realized, wasn't as sweet as I thought it would be. It was hollow, leaving me with a sense of loss that couldn't be filled by anything. It took a few more months before everything truly settled. The legal battles ended, and Lana's attempts to rebuild her life faltered. She moved out of the city, trying to escape the shame of her actions. Jason, too, was left to pick up the pieces of his own ruined reputation, and as for me, I began to rebuild. The company was thriving again, stronger than before. My children were doing well, and although the scars of the past remained, I knew I was stronger for having gone through it. But I couldn't deny the truth that I had learned during this entire ordeal. Sometimes, even when you get what you think you want, it doesn't heal the pain. Sometimes, the only way forward is to let go of the past, and so, with the last remnants of anger slowly fading, I stepped into a new chapter of my life. It wasn't one I had planned, but it was mine to write. The lessons learned in the wake of betrayal were ones I would never forget. The revenge was complete, but the healing was just beginning. As time passed, the initial rush of vengeance and the sense of power that had once consumed me began to fade, leaving space for something more profound and unsettling: the reality of what had happened. The weight of everything I'd endured settled in, and I found myself questioning whether my quest for retribution had truly brought me the closure I had hoped for. I had destroyed Lana's life, no question about that. Her reputation, once held in high regard, was shattered beyond repair. The company we had built together, the business that was once a symbol of our shared dreams, had been taken from her, and it was now flourishing under my leadership. Yet, as the days wore on, a part of me couldn't shake the feeling that the victory, although sweet in some ways, had come at a great cost. When you invest so much of your soul into something, even when that something is revenge, the outcome rarely feels as satisfying as you anticipate. I thought I wanted to see Lana's world crumble before her eyes. But the more I watched her spiraling, the more I realized that my satisfaction had come not from her downfall, but from the redemption of my own self-respect. For months, I had buried myself in the success of the company, trying to focus solely on rebuilding. It was a welcome distraction, but as the dust settled, I couldn't ignore the truth any longer. The life I had known, the future I had envisioned, was gone. What was left now was a hollow shell of a man who had spent too long nursing a wound, too focused on the past to move forward. It took a long time before I was ready to truly heal. But in the stillness of the nights, when I found myself alone, I couldn't deny that something had shifted within me. I wasn't the same person who had walked into that office months ago, naive and trusting. The pain had transformed me into someone harder, more guarded. And I wasn't sure I liked the person I'd become. The first step toward recovery came when I allowed myself to grieve, not for Lana, not for the destruction she had caused, but for the man I had lost in the process. I had sacrificed too much of myself in the pursuit of vengeance, and now, standing in the rubble of everything I had fought for, I saw the cost in full. It wasn't just Lana who had been destroyed, it was me, too. I took long walks in the evenings, sometimes in silence, sometimes with a friend, just to escape the weight of my thoughts. The routine became my sanctuary, a way to regain some sense of normalcy. As time passed, I began to rediscover pieces of who I had been before Lana's betrayal. I focused on my children, who were growing into strong, kind-hearted individuals, unaffected by the chaos that had upended their lives. Their resilience reminded me that not everything had been lost, but it wasn't just my children who brought me back to life. It was also the realization that my future was still open to possibilities. For the first time in years, I found myself able to consider the idea of moving forward. My anger had dissipated, and I began to rebuild the relationships I had neglected. I reached out to old friends, many of whom I had distanced myself from during the ordeal, and started to reconnect. Slowly but surely, the walls I had built around myself began to crumble. Of course, not all wounds healed easily. Trust was a fragile thing, and though I had learned the hard way just how easily it could be broken, I also realized that I could no longer live in fear of betrayal. I had survived the worst, and though the scars would never fully fade, they no longer held the same weight. They had become part of my story, but they no longer defined me. It was around this time that I decided to make one final, symbolic gesture. I gathered all the documents, the evidence of Lana's fraudulent activities, the emails, the records of her deception, and I destroyed them. I didn't need to hold on to the remnants of the past anymore. I had already won, and keeping the evidence felt like a burden I no longer wanted to carry. I had nothing to prove to anyone, not Lana, not anyone who had once doubted me. The business continued to thrive, but I no longer viewed it as the focal point of my existence. I learned to find joy in the small moments, the laughter of my children, the quiet peace of a well-earned night's sleep, the companionship of friends who had stuck by me through thick and thin. My life had been turned upside down, but now, it was time to find a new direction, one that was not defined by revenge, but by renewal. Lana's attempts to regain her footing had fizzled out long ago. She had tried to rebuild a life, but the foundation she had built was cracked, and no matter how hard she tried, she couldn't fix it. As for Jason, his life was also in ruins. The fallout from the scandal had completely destroyed their careers, and I had a strange sense of satisfaction watching their world crumble. But there was no joy in it anymore. It was simply the natural consequence of their choices. Eventually, I moved on, not in the sense that I had forgotten what had happened, but in the way that I had learned to live with it. I had emerged from the darkness of betrayal a stronger, more self-aware person. The scars were still there, but they no longer controlled me. I had reclaimed my life, my future, and my sense of self-worth. And that was worth more than any revenge could ever give me. The last time I saw Lana was in a brief, unexpected encounter at a business event. She looked different, tired, worn down by the years of trying to stay afloat. She didn't approach me, nor did I approach her. We simply exchanged a look from across the room, and for the first time in a long time, I realized that I had no anger left in me. I wasn't bitter anymore. I had forgiven her, not for her sake, but for mine. Holding on to the past, to the bitterness of betrayal, had only kept me anchored to a life I no longer wanted. And now, I was free. It wasn't a perfect ending, but it was mine. And that, I realized, was enough. As I sat on the balcony of my home one evening, looking out over the city that I had spent years building and losing, a feeling of profound stillness washed over me. The journey had been tumultuous, filled with heartache and pain, but also with growth and self-discovery. The events of the past, betrayal, revenge, the unraveling of my marriage, had all led me here, to this moment of reflection. In a way, I had been expecting closure to come in a dramatic form, like the final page of a gripping novel. I thought that after all the destruction, after all the battles fought in the courtroom and in the depths of my soul, there would be a clear, defined end. But there wasn't. What I had learned was that the end was never as neat or as satisfying as I had hoped. Instead, closure came in small, quiet moments. The way my children had healed and flourished despite everything. The genuine smiles from old friends who had forgiven my distance and supported me through the hardest times. Even in the passing of time, when the echoes of betrayal no longer stung as sharply, I found peace. I had once thought that revenge would be the final word. That watching Lana and Jason's lives crumble would be my ultimate satisfaction. But now I understood, my true revenge had been reclaiming my life. They had tried to take everything from me, the trust, the respect, the company, even my identity. But in the end, it was they who had lost everything. They had destroyed themselves with their greed, their betrayal, their lies. And no amount of destruction from my end could ever erase the damage they had done to themselves. One afternoon, I found myself walking past the old family photos that had been kept in storage, untouched for months. I stood there for a long time, just looking at the pictures of us, Lana and I, the kids, the life we had once shared. The photos seemed almost foreign to me now, as though they belonged to someone else. A chapter that had been closed, even though it was once so vivid in my mind that it struck me then, how much I had changed. I was no longer the man who had been so blinded by love and loyalty that I couldn't see the truth. I wasn't the man who had crumbled under the weight of betrayal. I wasn't the man who had planned and executed revenge in the heat of anger. I had evolved, and as much as I had suffered, I could not deny that this transformation was the only thing worth the pain. What had Lana thought she would gain? She had wanted my wealth, my position, my love. She had taken all those things, believing that her betrayal would come with no consequence. But it was her own soul that had been stripped bare in the process. Watching her destroy her own reputation, her career, her connections, while I was left standing, bruised but intact, had been more satisfying than I had anticipated. Yet, in that satisfaction, there was no joy. Only the quiet realization that we were both left with nothing that we had once valued. The hardest part of this journey was forgiving myself. For so long, I had blamed myself for not seeing the signs earlier, for allowing my trust to be broken in such a brutal way. But with time, I came to understand that trust had never been the issue. It was the betrayal, the choice she made, that had shattered everything. I couldn't control that. And I had to accept that there was no shame in allowing myself to love someone, even when they were unworthy of it. Eventually, I started to date again. At first, it was casual, just getting to know people, testing the waters. But with time, I began to trust again. Not easily, and not without hesitation, but I allowed myself to experience life in its entirety, including love. I didn't expect to replace Lana or to find someone who would undo the pain. I wasn't looking for a mirror image of the past. I was searching for something new, something real, something that wasn't weighed down by the ghost of my former marriage. In the end, I realized that the most important thing was not the vengeance I had taken, or the financial windfall that came with the downfall of the company. It wasn't about restoring my reputation or securing my future. It was about reclaiming myself, my dignity, my peace of mind, my future. I had taken my life back, piece by piece, and I had done it for myself, not for anyone else. That was the true reward that I found at the journey toward self-healing had a rhythm all its own. The anger slowly faded, replaced by a quiet acceptance. The hurt, though never truly gone, was no longer a constant companion. I had learned to live with it, to integrate it into my story, but it no longer defined me, and so, as the years passed, I continued to move forward. The company I had once shared with Lana became a beacon of what I had achieved, a reminder of how far I had come. The world around me kept turning, and though the scars of my past would remain, I no longer saw them as wounds. They were simply part of who I had become, a man who had been broken, but had rebuilt himself stronger, wiser, and more at peace with who he was. I never saw Lana again. Our paths had crossed one final time at the court hearing, but after that, our lives moved in different directions. She continued to struggle, her life reduced to the ashes of the empire she had tried to steal. Jason, too, had faded into obscurity, his own actions catching up with him. I was content with the knowledge that my journey had come full circle. The man I was now was a far cry from the one who had walked into that storm of betrayal. And in the end, I was the one who had emerged victorious, not because of revenge, but because I had chosen to heal, to forgive, and to live my life on my own terms.